Thanks, Clark. That's us in public session, and welcome to this meeting of the Education Committee. Can I ask broadcasting to keep members in the spotlight for the next item, and ask members if you're aware of any apologies? I know we've received apologies from Harry Harvey due to a clash with another committee.
Chair, I have a hard stop at 10 o'clock. Is Robbie here, by the way?
Thanks for that, Robbie.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, then I'll move us to our... Yes, go ahead.
I have to leave at 10:15. I have another meeting.
Thanks for that. Okay, then I'll move us on to our next substantive agenda item, which is an oral briefing from the Northern Ireland Assembly Research and Information Service. Can I ask Assembly Broadcasting to remove members and add our witnesses, and refer members to a briefing paper from the Research and Information Service at page 4, and correspondence from the bill sponsor, Pat Catney, MLA, on the financial implications of the bill at page 27. Can I give a warm welcome to Niamh Devlin, Research Officer at the Northern Ireland Assembly Research and Information Services, and invite Niamh to brief members on the research paper. Thanks, Niamh.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. It's great to be here and to have the opportunity to provide a briefing on the bill paper from the Assembly Research and Information Service. By way of background, the paper was prepared to inform committee consideration of the Period Products Free Provision Bill by drawing together detail on the proposals of the bill, by undertaking a review of research related to the accessibility of period products, and providing an overview of existing schemes for the provision of free period products in Northern Ireland and in the rest of the UK. The paper provides descriptive commentary on the bill's individual clauses and highlights issues for further consideration throughout. The paper refers to a variety of matters. Therefore, for the next 15 minutes, I will do my best to concisely summarise the key points. I will commence with evidence generated via desk research, which provides insight into the affordability and accessibility of period products. Literature reflects that the past decade has seen growing awareness of menstrual-related challenges, including the issue of period poverty, which is defined as a lack of access to sanitary products due to financial constraints. However, evidence suggests that despite this growing awareness, barriers remain in ensuring affordable and easy access to period products for all. For instance, in a UK-wide survey of 14 to 21-year-olds, Plan International UK found that 1 in 10 respondents had been unable to afford sanitary wear, and 1 in 7 had struggled to afford it. A follow-up survey in May 21 found that this figure had increased to 36% during lockdown, suggestive of the impact of the pandemic on the affordability and accessibility of period products. Furthermore, a survey of over 1,700 pupils in June 2021 revealed that over a quarter have had difficulty accessing period products. Almost 12% reported difficulty accessing period products because their parents couldn't afford them, while 6.5% said they themselves could not afford products. Plan International UK refers to a toxic trio of issues which limit access to period products and contribute to period poverty. These include the cost of sanitary products, a lack of education about periods, and shame, stigma, and taboo. Furthermore, review of the literature suggests that there is a growing body of evidence that menstruation is experienced negatively, that it contributes to absenteeism from school and workplace, that it can lead to feelings of embarrassment or shame, and that it is a source of psychosocial stress. Period stigma has been highlighted as a key issue. Most recently, the CS survey revealed that over half of pupils feel embarrassed when buying period products. Further evidence suggests that some may feel that they have no choice but to miss school if their menstrual needs are not met. The CS survey revealed that 8.1% of pupils have missed school because they did not have access to sufficient products. Almost 1 in 10 of these pupils reported that they have missed school multiple times due to insufficient access to products. Research suggests that limited access to products can lead some to create makeshift solutions that are uncomfortable and unsafe. Furthermore, studies have shown that a lack of appropriate products can result in upset, distress, and discomfort. Further research suggests a negative mental health impacts arising from period poverty. Evidence reflects that certain groups are more likely to face challenges in accessing period products. The aforementioned survey statistics largely reflect the experiences of young people and note some of the difficulties and associated impacts arising for students and pupils who are unable to afford period products. Research suggests that other groups face particular barriers in accessing period products, and that this includes homeless people, those with disabilities, and menstruators who may be non-binary or transgender. Asylum seekers and refugees have also been identified as particularly vulnerable to their menstrual needs not being addressed. Other groups identified as facing additional barriers include Roma and traveller communities, victims of domestic abuse, individuals with caring responsibilities, and those living in remote locations. Going forward, further consideration might be given to the needs of groups who may face particular barriers in accessing period products and how these needs might be identified and met through a universal scheme of free period product provision as per Clause 1 of the Bill. Similar to guidance issued in Scotland, consideration might be given as to whether specific consultation arrangements may be required to ensure that the needs of these groups are explored and appropriate alternative arrangements established to facilitate access to products. Now moving to Clause 2 and the requirement that it places in all departments of the NI Executive to specify by regulations the public service bodies within its functions that must make period products obtainable free of charge on their premises. As members will be aware, the Bill requires that schools, further education and higher education premises and health and social care trusts and boards must provide free period products on their premises. Therefore, in light of this requirement, I thought there would be merit in taking some time to provide further detail on the two pilot schemes commenced this September to provide for free period products in schools and higher education institutions. Although the respective pilots by DE and DFE are in the early stages and a full assessment of uptake, implementation arrangements and outcomes is yet to be determined, information on the pilots can provide insight into how the schemes have been established, in addition to any logistical and cost considerations that may be relevant in the context of the Bill. We'll start with the Period Dignity pilot scheme led by the Department of Education in conjunction with SIA and the EA. As members will be aware, this pilot scheme is designed to make period products freely available to pupils in primary, post-primary, special schools and EOTA settings. It's expected to cost $2.6 million over 3 years. The breakdown of costs provided by the department reveals that just over $2 million of the total relates to the cost of period products. The department has reported that once the scheme is embedded, the cost of period products for the school sector will likely be in the region of $0.9 million per year. Guidance developed by SIA for schools suggests that the budget for free period products has been allocated between schools based on the total number of learners enrolled in the school of menstruating age. For primary schools, this is calculated at 12.5% of Year 6 and Year 7 enrolments. Weighting has also been applied based on the percentage of pupils in schools entitled to free school meals. Expected uptake for the pilot has been based on similar schemes elsewhere, including in England and Scotland. As such, it has been estimated that there will be a 15% uptake in the first year, and that this will increase each year as the scheme becomes established to 20% in Year 2 and 30% in Year 3. Uptake is defined in the school guidance as a percentage of pupils using the scheme for all their needs throughout the academic year, including taking products home. This varies from the requirements of the Bill, which propose to provide for pupils' needs whilst on the school premises. It is notable that school guidance on the pilot states that it is not the policy intention to make blanket provision of period products for all pupils, and that the provision does not extend to the school holidays. However, schools have been advised that they may wish to consider making provision over the holidays for pupils for whom it is essential if their budget allows. It is not yet clear how many, if any, schools might be providing for period products during the school holidays. Clause 2 of the Bill requires education providers to make free period products available to learners attending the premises in person. Consideration might be given as to whether specific arrangements are required to be put in place for children and young people who are homeschooled or accessing education remotely, and whether this would be provided for at Clause 1. I'll now move briefly to the pilot scheme to provide period products in higher education institutions. Feedback from the Department for the Economy revealed that when developing this programme, the DFE worked with university stakeholders, including students' union groups, who provided background information on their own provision schemes, including usage and uptake. When establishing costs, DFE estimates were informed by indicative costs provided by Ulster University Student Union, which were then calculated across all higher education institutions based on their overall enrolment figures. The total funding allocated across all institutions is £5,140 for the year. This funding is for the purchase of period products only, as pilot scheme monitoring and reporting is intended to be efficient and not require significant time or resource commitments. With regards to usage of the scheme to date, officials noted that 3 months into the pilot, there is little indication of uniformity in relation to the use and uptake of the products. Reported figures show varied usage across the institutions, ranging from 12% in one to 61% in another. It is anticipated that greater information and clarity around demand and usage will emerge as the pilot progresses into its latter stages. To inform the paper, Ray has asked the department about proposals to implement a similar pilot in further education colleges. Officials stated that the 6 FE colleges already have initiatives and partnerships in place to help ensure students have access to free sanitary products within their campuses, and that these products are supplied from a range of sources. The department reported that its FE division has established a college working group to consider how best to implement a similar pilot in further education to that being undertaken in higher education without disrupting the existing initiatives and partnerships. It was noted that once agreed, one of the pilot's main aims will be to quantify trends in demand for free sanitary products for pupils in further education, and that would be used as an evidence base going forward. Similarly, it has been noted that the higher education pilot is being used to gather evidence of and learning about period poverty within the higher education institutions, as there was previously no such data available. Now moving to other provision to provide free period products in Northern Ireland. The committee will be aware of some of the initiatives delivered at a local level, which are largely driven by voluntary and community organisations such as the Homeless Period Poverty Action Group, and the likes of the Red Box. Some local councils have recently commenced pilots to provide free period products in some public buildings. For instance, in March 2019, Derry City and Strabane District Council began a pilot scheme to provide free sanitary products in its venues. Currently, products are available free of charge in 6 of the 9 leisure centres in the areas and in the Guildhall. In April of this year, Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council announced a pilot scheme to provide free sanitary products in leisure centres across the borough. Information requested by RAIS revealed that free products are available in the 3 larger leisure centres in the borough. In October 2021, Newry and Down District Council announced the launch of the Pink Present programme, which is an initiative to provide free period products to post-primary schools in the area. The initiative commenced in 4 post-primary schools with the expectation that it would be rolled out to others in the district in the months following the launch. It's not clear how this scheme might operate alongside the wider school pilot scheme led by the Department of Education. At this stage, I will touch briefly on the definition of public service body as proposed by the bill. Some of the considerations at the second stage were with regard to specific bodies that might fall under the scope of public service body as defined in Clause 8. The definition of public service body in the bill is consistent with the Scottish Act and refers to a statutory body, that is, a body constituted by or under an enactment that either provides services to the public or otherwise serves a public interest. In the Scottish context, it might be helpful to note that no public service bodies have been specified at the time that the Scottish Government issued initial guidance to responsible bodies, including local authorities and education providers, with regards to exercise of their duties under the Scottish Act, and that guidance was issued in September of this year. At this juncture, I should note that much of the commentary in the RAIS paper is with reference to the Scottish context and the guidance issued to support responsible bodies in fulfilment of their duties, in light of the similarities with the bills introduced. Consideration is also given to provision for free period products in the rest of the UK. With an eye to time, I will briefly turn to the other clauses of the bill and some potential issues for consideration as reflected in the RAIS paper. Clause 3 sets out the particular requirements that must be met by the Department of Health and the specified public service bodies when fulfilling duties at clauses 1 and 2. Namely, that products are accessible with reasonable ease, that a reasonable choice of types of products are available, and that there is respect for dignity. Given the parallels with the Scottish Act, I thought it might be helpful to briefly touch on how these requirements are proposed to be practically taken forward as per guidance issued by the Scottish Government to responsible bodies. For example, when ensuring that products are available with reasonable ease, the Scottish guidance notes that there should generally be no forms to complete or other information required before products can be accessed. In terms of reasonable choice, the Scottish guidance notes that the full range of products does not have to be available in all locations or through all delivery methods. Responsible bodies are also advised to consider the most appropriate way to make reusable period products freely available for those who may wish to use them. With regards to respect for dignity, it is noted that individuals should not have to justify why they need products or justify the amount that is needed. Going forward, consideration might be given to how the requirements might be practically fulfilled by the Department of Health and public service bodies in Northern Ireland. It may be worth noting that the DFE Period Poverty Pilot Programme in higher education allows each institution flexibility in its model for providing period products. However, it does require each institution to demonstrate that it has met similar principles to those proposed by Clause 3. That is that a variety of products are made available, giving students choice about the products they want to use. The products are easily accessible and sufficient to meet individual needs, and that the scheme enables gender equality, ensuring that anyone who menstruates can access products, and that the language used in awareness raising is gender neutral. There may be merit in further consulting with the FE on how these requirements are being practically fulfilled by the institutions. Moving briefly on to other clauses, Clause 4 requires departments to issue guidance to the public bodies specified in Clause 2 as soon as is reasonably practicable after the body is specified. The body must be consulted before the guidance is produced. Clause 5 requires each specified public service body to publish a written statement describing how it has had regard to the guidance and consulted on and developed its arrangements for the provision of free period products as soon as is reasonably practicable after receiving the guidance from departments under Clause 4. Format of the statement or where it should be published are not mandated in the bill. Rather, the public service body has flexibility to include any other information in the statement that it thinks appropriate, and to publish a statement in such ways as it thinks appropriate. In light of earlier reference to the needs of particular groups in accessing period products, consideration might be given to the flexibility granted to public service bodies in preparing and publishing statements, whilst ensuring that the accessibility of the statement is maintained for all product users. Once the arrangements are established, Clause 6 requires the departments to publish locations where free period products are available 1 year after the making of regulations under Clause 2, and on at least an annual basis thereafter. Responsible bodies have the flexibility to choose how to make this information available. Consideration might be given to whether the requirements of the bill ensure timely and accessible dissemination of information to all potential users, including those identified in the literature as facing additional needs. Clause 7 provides key definitions used in the bill. Needs at Clause 7c is defined in terms of menstruation by a person, ensuring that the bill applies to anyone who menstruates, including transgender and non-binary persons, as well as women and girls. The definition for period products at Clause 7b allows for the provision of sustainable options. It is worth noting that SIA's recent school survey found that almost a quarter of pupils believe that eco-factors are important when choosing period products. Furthermore, recent years have seen increasing attention given to sustainable menstruation, which refers to practices where environmentally friendly alternatives to period products are used. Amongst the Sustainable Development Goals is responsible consumption and production, one of the targets of which is that by 2030 there will be a substantial reduction in waste generation through prevention, reduction, recycling and reuse. Consideration might be given to the role of sustainable period product options in contributing to that goal. On a more general point regarding Sustainable Development Goals, the Global Menstrual Collective notes that investment in menstrual health and hygiene can contribute to their achievement. The literature further suggests that addressing menstrual health and hygiene may enable progress across the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly those related to education, gender equality, health and well-being, and water, sanitation and hygiene. However, some studies suggest that further research is required to fully understand how menstrual health and hygiene can contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. I recognise that I've been speaking for quite some time, and whilst I hope the briefing covered most salient points, I also recognise it was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, as there is an array of matters to cover. I will conclude by saying that I'm happy to take questions, but would note that there are some aspects where I am awaiting further information, which will be shared with the committee as soon as received. Therefore, if I can't answer your question this morning, I will make sure to come back to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Niamh. As always, really appreciate that briefing, and obviously, as I advised members earlier, that briefing paper to which you refer is available at page 4 of the packs. Can I bring in members for questions at that stage then, if broadcasting could bring members into the spotlight? And I'll call Deputy Chairperson Pat Sheehan, MLA.
Thank you, Chair. And I haven't many questions because that was a very comprehensive briefing, Niamh. Thanks very much for that. Just in terms of, you mentioned it briefly in your presentation there about school holidays. There's no provision being made for the supply of period products to school children during school holidays. Is that right?
Sorry, Pat, is that within the bill or in the current DE pilot scheme that you're making reference to?
Well, tell me about both, will you?
Yes, the DE pilot scheme, which is currently running, my understanding is that the guidance suggests that provision is predominantly to meet the needs of pupils whilst in school, and that is, as I understand, how the costings have been derived. However, it is recognised that schools, if they have sufficient budget, can identify pupils who may require free period products over the school holidays, and if their budget allows, that they may extend that into the holidays. In terms of the bill, Clause 2 sets out the public service bodies provide period products for use on the premises, and as such, it is not proposed that Clause 2 of the bill, which is the educational scheme, that will provide for free period products for pupils and students over the holidays. However, the universal scheme at Clause 1 does propose to provide period products to meet all needs, and that would be over the holidays.
Okay. Thanks for that. That's all I have. Thanks for your work, Niamh. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Pat. Conscious Robin and Diane have to head on. But if we can be brief, hopefully we'll get to them. Can I bring in Robin Newton, MLA? Unless you want to defer to Diane, Robin.
Thank you, Chair, and can I thank Nave for the briefing. It's up to her usual very high standards. And as you suggest, Chair, I'll defer to Diane on this matter. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Diane Dodds, MLA, thanks.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Neve, for the briefing. It is very, very interesting. In terms of Clause 1 and Clause 2, how will they work together?
My understanding is that Clause 1 is proposed to provide for the majority of a user's needs, and as such, it is expected that the products that would be provided in the premises of public service bodies at Clause 2, that would be required essentially to fulfil a gap in need, predominantly if, my understanding, certainly from the Scottish context, is if somebody were to expect their period unexpectedly, or if they were to have come into premises without provision, it is then proposed that the period products available on the premises would be a means to ensure that their needs are met. Certainly, my understanding when it came to the costings is that in considering the cost of a universal scheme, some calculations and adjustments were made to the cost for the universal scheme to discount for the cost of period products to be provided on the premises of educational settings. And as such, it is expected that the majority of a pupil's needs and the students' needs during term time would be made through the provision of free period products in educational settings as proposed by Clause 2 of the bill.
Okay. Okay, I'll maybe go back and ask Pat some questions around those as well, just so we're clear how they interact with each other. In the and I may have missed this, Neve, so forgive me. In talking to DE and Economy about the pilots that are currently underway there, what is the uptake in that? And has I'm trying to figure out, are there things that we would need to learn to help people overcome the barriers to asking for free period products? And has there any work been evaluated? I know it's really early days for them, but they're bound to have some indication of how it's going.
Yes, thank you for that, Diane. In terms of the DFE pilot in higher education, some data was provided on request by RAISE in terms of the uptake in the higher education institutions, and it was deemed to be highly variable at this stage, given the early stage of the pilot. It was proposed it was.
Are there reasons for that though? Because I mean, some of the other briefings that we've had to the committee indicate that it's where they're placed. Do you have to go and ask? Are there barriers being created? I mean, if the scheme is there and the money is there, you want people to be able to access it. So are there barriers? And maybe even the institutions themselves don't think of them as barriers. You know, sometimes it's, you know.
As I understand it, there is a review ongoing to establish what the barriers might be and what might be impeding the uptake, and that is in the higher education pilot. In terms of the DE pilot scheme, I have requested some information on uptake and I haven't yet received that, but I will provide that as and when it comes in. Certainly a review is planned by CCA. As I understand, they are administering a survey and that is due to be facilitated in December time, so it should be any time now, and that will provide further information on the rollout, on the uptake. I imagine it will explore any barriers and it will explore so learning more generally. So it would be helpful, I would suggest, to have that conversation with the Department of Education and with SEA, recognising, as you've noted, that it is early stages in terms of the initial rollout of the pilot.
Thank you very much. Chair, would it be possible then that the committee request some sort of updates from both departments in relation to the schemes, so that we are all knocking on the door looking for the information? And Neve, of course, will pass on what she knows when she gets it.
Absolutely. If Clark can make a note of that action, thanks.
Yeah, I think that's worthwhile doing. I think that, I mean, there are some issues with the bill for me, but the principle of the bill is absolutely right. But you want to get it correct, and sort of gauging what's going on at the moment might be useful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Could I bring in Daniel McCrossan, MLA, please? Thanks, Daniel.
Hi, Chair. Thanks very much, Neve, for taking questions from us today on this bill. I'll just go straight to it, Chair. I might have missed if this was asked or not, so you can keep me right. You refer to research, Neve, conducted by CCEA, which reported 11.8% of respondents indicated their parents could not afford period products. The report also suggested that 6.5% of respondents said they could not afford period products as well. Are we therefore noting a total of 18.3% of respondents having difficulty accessing period products, or the 6.5 part of the 11.8?
Thank you, Daniel. My understanding is that the 6.5 and the 11.8 are part of a further figure which relates to general difficulties. So there is a figure, and unfortunately I don't have it just to hand, which provides an indication of the percentage of those who have found it difficult to access period products. And then the proportionality in terms of the percentage of parents and the percentage of pupils who were unable to purchase products or afford products, that is part of that broader issue, but I can get that further information for you.
Okay, that's grand, thank you. In your research, you mentioned groups that face particular barriers in accessing period products, including the homeless people, which we've heard from a few homeless representative groups, and those with disabilities. While researching, did you come across examples of schemes to support such groups that we could be made aware of?
With regard, sorry, when you reference schemes, are you talking about schemes in terms of free period product provision?
Yeah.
So I wanted to clarify that. What I would say is that in terms of the evidence that is available, internationally, it is fairly limited. I think it is understood that Scotland is the first country to pass legislation of this kind to ensure universal provision of free period products. And as such, there isn't a great deal of information to draw on in terms of international comparators or indeed national comparators. What is proposed, and I suppose in terms of the paper, a lot of what was drawn is in relation to the Scottish guidance, is to get to further understanding of some of the barriers that those groups may be facing. That would be really critical to consult with those groups directly, or indeed to ensure consultation and engagement with representatives of those groups in the local area. So I recognise that as part of the bill, it's proposed that there is to be consultation with product users on how their needs would be met, and it is anticipated that is built into the bill requirements.
Okay, thank you. Clause 3, there's a reference to ensuring reasonable choice of types of products. In your research, did you come across how this has been identified or administered in other or defined or administered in other jurisdictions?
Again, I think it is recognised that it is very much a matter of individual preference and choice, and consultation and engagement with users is absolutely critical. I mean, the SEA survey did highlight that almost a quarter of pupils feel that eco-factors are important when it comes to considering period products. But overall, there isn't a hard and fast rule as it was. Generally, it is deemed to be important to ensure that there is a choice of products available, including sustainable options, including the likes of tampons and pads, but that it is very much at the discretion of users.
Okay. And Chair, I'll be very brief. The operation of this bill will no doubt require different departments to cooperate together in order for it to be effective and successful. In your research, did you notify other jurisdictions have done this?
Again, as yet there aren't very many similar schemes to draw upon. However, I would refer to the fact that the Welsh Government is currently consulting on a period dignity strategic action plan, and that it is proposed to be taken forward as a cross-government initiative. There are a variety of actions outlined, and I can provide the committee with further information on that. But very much at its core in terms of design, consultation and implementation is an expectation that departments would work together in taking that action plan forward.
Okay, and finally, the bill requires extensive consultation with a wide range of stakeholders, as did the Scottish Act as well. Did you come across any information about how time-consuming the consultations might be from the experience of others, or how much consultations would cost?
That wasn't something that came out of the literature. There is some suggestions of the best means to engage with product users, particularly future product users, and to do so in a school setting. But in terms of the resource required, the time required to engage in that consultation, that isn't something that is written into literature available more widely, I'm afraid. Certainly that I hadn't come across it.
That's great. Okay, thank you, Niamh. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Daniel. Is Robbie still available for a quick question? Robbie Butler?
Yes, sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Technology is absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Niamh, for that absolutely fantastic piece of research and the delivery of it. And a lot of the questions have been asked, but there's one that sort of is running about my head, Niamh, and I'm not sure if it's picked up in the legislation at all, or it might be picked up in good practice elsewhere. In terms of the quality of the products that young girls will receive and have available to them, is there anything to ensure that the quality is the same no matter which establishment that it comes from? And so that, and that in areas, for instance, where there may be other pressures on finances, that whoever is procuring them, that there's a minimum standard of product and that everybody gets access to a good level and a good standard of product?
Robbie, I'm afraid you have stumped me on that one. That's something I could look into, certainly in terms of the arrangements that have been established in Scotland, England and Wales in terms of procurement arrangements, that is, to obtain products. There may well be some learning in terms of what has been set up and also through the DE pilot scheme, but I wouldn't be able to talk to how the quality of the products is maintained dependent on the arrangement.
Yeah, I think it's obviously it's quite an intimate product, and the usage. It's really important in terms of the level of quality of the product, in terms of not just safety but also dignity, and that there's no sliding scale here. That when young people do available products, that they can ensure that the standard that is given is absolutely has to be achieved, but also linear right across the province, regardless of where you're from, as well. And to be honest, apart from that, if that is possible for you, Niamh, to maybe get a little bit of information on the other questions that I had in mind have already been asked by the other members. So I'm happy enough, Chair, if that can be taken on board.
Thanks, Robbie. Robin, do you want to come back in or content with Diane's questions?
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I'm trying to understand at this stage the budgeting for it, but I think that's maybe a question for a later stage.
No problem, Robin. Thank you. Can I bring Nicola Brogan, MLA, in, please?
Thanks, Chair, and hello, Niamh, and thanks very much for that briefing. It was really, really detailed. Lots of really good information there, and will certainly help us when we're going through the bill. The first point I wanted to kind of talk about was about the DE pilot scheme. I think additional information on that would actually be really helpful, because we had evidence from another group last week who suggested that I think they thought 30% of schools in the north had taken on this pilot scheme, which they consider quite low. I'm not sure what year it started here, but I think you said there, and from based in Scotland, that normally you'd expect 15% of schools in the first year, and then that to increase like by 5% in the following years. So if that's not so bad, if it is the case, I think it was this year it was in the north. So if that's the case, and it's 30% already, it's not too bad. But and we had said, maybe it was because of like pressures with COVID and just all the pressures around principals at the minute that I suppose maybe they potentially overlooked this scheme. But if we could get the figures now, it would be really helpful. And I think that we can maybe put like publicise it more, that the scheme is there, whatever, and available to schools.
Yeah, sorry, Nicola, just to come in there. In terms of the costings, my understanding of this year is that the costings for the first year of the pilot scheme are based on a 15% uptake, and then 20% in year 2 and 30% in year 3. And as you suggested, that is based on projections from other jurisdictions, including England and Scotland. And certainly in terms of the English scheme, the budget that is provided to schools is capped at 35% uptake, or I should say 35% of pupils of menstruating age who avail of the scheme. So it is perhaps just notable that there is that cap in place at around the 35% mark in the English context.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that, Niamh. I do think more information that would be helpful, even for us all to get our heads around, because all these numbers is quite detailed, as you know. The other big issue I've had when kind of looking in at period poverty and this bill, the period products bill, is about attendance at school and how that affects children's educational achievements and the negative effect it has on it, I suppose. Do you have any evidence to show that this bill or a bill like this would actually decrease levels of absence at school?
What I would firstly say is that there is a range of evidence that suggests that where menstruation needs are not met, that does lead to absenteeism. There are a variety of national studies, international studies, and at a local level, a lot of self-reported data. However, it is also worth noting that in terms of the evaluation of schemes where free period products are provided in schools, that evaluation in terms of how it impacts on attendance, there isn't as much information as available, and perhaps it is the case that it is due to the fact that many schemes are fairly new, and it really has only been within the last number of years, the last few years certainly, within the UK context, that free period product pilot schemes have been delivered in a school setting. So it is clear that there's evidence that suggests that not having period products does lead to absenteeism, but I wouldn't say there is as much information readily available in terms of the direct causal link between providing period products in schools and how that impacts on improved attendance.
Okay, but I suppose common sense would kind of say that if not having the period products is a barrier to getting to school and to getting education, and if they're there, then hopefully that when the evidence is available, that it would show that it's decreasing absenteeism. Hopefully. That's fine. What's other? Oh yes. So the other point you'd made, which I think is a really important one as well, is about environmentally friendly products. Now, I suppose, again, I brought this up with in our last session, evidence session on the period products, and was with Homeless Period Belfast, and the response I got, which I completely understand and agree with, was let's try and get the period products out there first before we start worrying about how environmentally friendly they are, which, as I say, I totally understand that, their argument. What's your opinion on that there? Do you think... what's your opinion? Do you think that would be better approaching it that way, just making sure we get good quality products? And as Robbie said, actually, I think that's a really important point too, about having the right quality products and available, and kind of not having to focus too much on how environmentally friendly they are.
What I would say is that the literature suggests that to ensure that a period poverty scheme or any legislation or policy, that it absolutely places the learner at the centre, and that any products that are made available or decisions made around the types of products that are available, that the user or the future product user is involved in that discussion. So in terms of the type of products that might be made available, what I would say is that it is really critical that users' views and experiences are built into that. And certainly there is some data at a local level, and the SEA survey suggested that around 1/4 of pupils feel that eco factors are important and should be taken into consideration when it comes to deciding on period product types. So I suppose it's a very roundabout way of answering your question, but what I would say is that it would be important to consult with product users on the types of products that could be available through a universal scheme or an educational scheme.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair, Niamh. Thanks for that. And I think it's something that should be considered as we go through the bill about how we can incorporate all products that are available. So thank you. Thanks very much for that, Niamh. It's really great to hear from you. And thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Nicola. Justin McNulty, MLA, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Niamh. A very detailed, comprehensive piece of work in terms of your briefing, so well done on that. Niamh, what is the feedback you're getting, if any, from young people in relation to provision of free period products? Has there been any?
And by that, Justin, I suppose there would be different ways of looking at it in terms of feedback. Some of it could be in terms of expectations around what might be made available, or in terms of an appetite for, is that what you're asking? Or in terms of the pilot scheme that's being delivered and led by DE at the minute? In terms of,
I guess across the board, Niamh, what is the general sense? What's the feeling from young people?
I suppose in answering that, I would refer to the survey findings and some of the self-reported data. And I suppose the largest local survey is the CCA survey, which was administered in June. And certainly there was very, very high appetite and interest and agreement around the fact that a free period product scheme should be made available. I think the figures were in the region of certainly over 95% of respondents to that survey were in agreement and saw the benefits of a free period product pilot scheme in school settings. Certainly in terms of how not having access to period products impacts on young people, there is a lot of self-reported data on how it makes them feel embarrassed, that they don't want to attend school, that there are, I suppose, a range of negative impacts arising for young people if their period product needs are not met.
Absolutely, yeah. And what's, Niamh, you're over the detail on this probably much more than I am. What's the challenges for the bill as you see it? What are the challenges for the bill as you see it now?
I wouldn't say, I don't know necessarily.
If any.
So speaking from a research perspective, what I would say is that in absence of a number or several similar schemes in other nations and jurisdictions and internationally, there isn't a great deal of evidence as it currently exists in terms of how these types of schemes might be delivered, either universally or the educational scheme, and certainly in relation to the provision of products in the buildings of public services. There would be limited information that would exist in terms of the cost and how some of that could be operationalised, but there's certainly other pilot schemes in Northern Ireland. There's information that could be drawn on. And one of the things that I would say at this time is that there is, I suppose, relatively limited data available with regards the number of people who are experiencing period poverty. And certainly when it came to the costings, my understanding is that a range of estimates were drawn on with regards to potential target group, recognising that the universal provision that would be provided for at Clause 1 would allow for needs to be met in a variety of ways, and not just to be made available for those who may require period products due to financial reasons. So I suppose it's a long-winded roundabout way of saying that from a research perspective, there is potentially a lack of evidence of how these schemes work in other jurisdictions and countries, simply because Scotland was the first to pass legislation to provide for free period products on a universal basis.
Okay, as well. So it's along with Scotland, it's a trailblazing scheme, but the anecdotal evidence is that it's very, very important to children and young people and women in general, and it should be full steam ahead. Would you agree?
I wouldn't like to give an opinion either way, but I would say that there is a lot of very positive feedback and evidence available in terms of the importance of this type of scheme.
Niamh, thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Justin. I think that's all, members. Niamh, could I just ask? It was raised with us recently by some of the charities doing great work in relation to period product provision that the bill ought to go further and specify that toilets and bathrooms should be in schools should be the location for period product provision, and indeed that it should refer to all public buildings. Does the Scottish legislation specify toilets and bathrooms in schools? Would you know that?
It doesn't. My understanding that at the earlier stages of the bill development was much more prescriptive, and one of the objectives of the bill in Scotland at stage 1 was that products in educational settings would be provided in toilets. However, at stage 2, amendments were made to the bill to provide for flexibility to ensure that it wasn't so prescriptive, and also to ensure that the needs and the wants of individual users were built in.
Okay, that's interesting. Maybe try and find out a wee bit more about why that was changed. If it is for the purpose of greater flexibility, I can understand that. I think there was a concern that if toilets and bathrooms weren't specified, that they might not be provided there. So maybe need to look into that in a wee bit more detail. Appreciate that answer, Niamh. That's helpful. And indeed, as everyone has said, for your extremely helpful briefing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, can I ask broadcasting to remove our witness and to add members back into the spotlight, and ask our clerk to summarise the actions resulting from our briefing today?
Thank you, Chair. Oh, sorry, I didn't realise my camera wasn't on. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Niamh. So, members, just to come back to some of the points that you raised in terms of the information that we're gathering for the committee stage. Diane mentioned requesting some more information from DFE and DE about their the pilot projects that they have been running, and I have done that on the committee's behalf. Diane, you also asked about a researcher from the business school at Ulster University, and I've been in touch with him. It's not in his portfolio, but he's going to signpost myself and Niamh to anything relevant in his circle. Then Daniel was asking just now for a breakdown of the percentage of need, and Niamh is going to come back to the committee with a bit more detail on that. As Niamh said, there is a lot of comparative information from other jurisdictions because there's only really Scotland, and that's really relatively recently implemented. So yeah, we didn't have as much information as we might have wanted about how other jurisdictions have coordinated this and consulted, etc. Robbie then raised the issue of quality, and Nicola the issue of sustainability. So, I mean, members, just to be aware, it is for you to give a steer about, what you think should be prioritised in this scheme. The stakeholders last week did represent, that for the utmost discretion, they would like products to be available inside toilet cubicles. The stakeholders who had been running a scheme on 4 campuses of University of Ulster were describing how they had used like a vending machine, although obviously they're not actually selling, but a kind of machine in the main bathroom area rather than inside a toilet cubicle. These are obviously location issues that would be picked up on under the intended bill proposals. at the consultation stage. But if if you as a committee want to, or as members want to, require that particular regard be given, say, to sustainable options, to just give it a little bit more profile in the bill, then that is something that you could look at doing by amendment. Similarly, the detail of the location, you might want to say that for people who have particular period anxiety or maybe early menstruators, that there should always be provision in the discretion of the toilet cubicle as well as in a more general location. So those are things that the committee has the option to specify, and they have come up in the last 2 meetings. Robin said he was going to come back with some points on budget. I have written on the committee's behalf to the Department of Education, the Department of Health, and the Department for Communities and Economy. Communities are actually the designated lead department on this bill. So that's part of the coordination task that we have. But it may be worth also writing to the finance department and just referring the bill, the cross-departmental duty, and the gender budgeting research that the committee did earlier in the year, just to see, some of those coordination questions that have come up might usefully be illuminated by the Department of Finance. Okay. Yeah, other than that, members, the period products free provision bill call for evidence that the committee put out is due to close this weekend, and there hasn't been an enormous uptake yet. So you may wish to extend that into January.
I think that sounds like a sensible suggestion, Clark. Yeah. Diane, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, just because I have to go, so I'm terribly sorry about this.
Go ahead.
The Department of Health, they are going to come and give evidence to us, aren't they? On this issue, since they're the named department on the bill. It would be very important to see how they see Clause 1 operating of the bill.
Yeah,
they've
been invited to in writing and in person. So.
Yeah, because I think without that, we would miss a huge element of the scrutiny that the bill needs on Clause 1, particularly going back to Robin's point about finance, etc. And I accept that the proposer of the bill has written to us, but I do think it does need a little more scrutiny. So Department of Health. And lastly, Aileen, we also requested some legal advice on the bill. Is that in train as well?
That's in train as well, Diane.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair. Apologies. I have to go.
That's great. Okay, members content to agree those actions?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Thanks for that, Clark. Okay, any other business? Nope. Okay, then
just very briefly.
Daniel, go ahead.
I know we're meeting the minister tomorrow.
Correct.
And there's no committee meetings next week.
No.
And you're certain?
Well, I mean, if you want one, we can try and, I mean, if you want to, if all the other members are aware you're proposing,
It's just Pat Cheekins texts me and he says he doesn't know how he's going to cope without a committee meeting next week.
I realise that's in good jest, Daniel. I appreciate that there's been a huge demand on people's time, and it has been a challenge, but there are obviously quite a few issues that we're trying to make sure we get through before we run out of time, and I appreciate everybody making themselves available tomorrow for that meeting with the minister. We're 9:15 tomorrow, Friday, 17th of December. Clark, isn't that right? Yeah, okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you want to convene a little bit earlier for a pre-meeting, or do you want to kick off a meeting?
Yeah, if we're there a little early, that makes sense. So look forward to seeing everyone then. All right, folks.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. All the best. Bye bye.